Hey, Holly.
Hey, Dave.
Welcome to the What Difference Does It Make podcast.
Yes, happy to be here for another week.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
Doing good. Hanging in there. How about yourself?
Same.
Right.
Good as can be, well as can be, healthy, safe, disturbed, sad, all of it.
Right. Well, the good news is we've got an amazing guest today. This is Alison Ellwood. As of this taping, we've only seen the first part of Laurel Canyon, which he is promoting right now. This is a documentary about the history of Laurel Canyon and everything that happened in the 60s and 70s and during the Renaissance period of the Los Angeles music scene in the 60s and 70s.
And Alison is the director of
yes.
the film, and it's you can see it on EPIX.
Yes. Alison has also directed American Jihad, History of the Eagles Parts 1 and 2, which we will probably get into as well, Spring Broke, Magic Trip, and Kesey's Search for a Cool Place. She has edited several feature documentary films, including the Oscar-nominated Enron, The Smartest Guys in the Room. She's also been a part of Catching Hell, Gonzo, the life and work of Dr. Hunter S. Thompson, as well as the upcoming Go-Go's documentary, which we may get into as well because we love that. Thank you, Alison, for joining us today.
Yes,
thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you guys.
Wonderful. The first question we always ask everyone, the start of your musical journey. What was your first album that you bought or exposure to music? Where'd you grow up? And yeah.
What reeled you into music?
Yeah.
I mean, I've always loved music. I'm trying to think what the first album might have been. I mean, probably Inagata DeVito.
Wow, that's an intense first purchase.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved that album, Iron Butterfly. That was such a trip. It was always the thing when we'd go to parties. I was a kid then, like 11. We'd go, just one more song. It was like the 26-minute song. So I don't know. I mean, I've always loved music. It's a great way of storytelling. It's a great way of sharing the human experience. And it just has always reached me. All kinds of music. I don't have a favorite type of music even.
You grew up with the Laurel Canyon music scene. Were you a fan before you, I read somewhere that you had the idea for this many years ago, and it just came to fruition. So you always were a fan of the music.
Yeah. I mean, when I was living in Los Angeles, over 20 years ago, I've always been obsessed with the Doors too. They were one of my favorite bands. And I started researching into doing a film about them and realized they lived in Laurel Canyon, and then started realizing all this crossover of these other artists. So I tried to do it over 20 years ago, but at that point the music rights were owned by so many disparate elements, and trying to package it all together was, too daunting. So I dropped it. And then when it came back around a few years ago, I was thrilled. So yeah, I've been a fan of the music. I was a little young for that scene then. And I was living overseas for part of that time too. So I unfortunately didn't get to ever even go to Laurel Canyon until I was well into my 20s. But it's a special place.
There is something about the music that spans so many generations. And we obviously didn't know when it was happening, how many generations it was going to cross. So I first started listening years ago because my parents were were obviously, much older. They were fans of the music. So I kind of took it on, and now, my kids and their friends, enjoy the music. You can't say that about all genres of music. What do you think it is about that? Is that just the music? There's the kind of maybe the magic that goes along with it.
Yeah, I mean, it was also this moment where this real renaissance of the singer-songwriter was happening. So the songs are very personal and speak to people very personally. And I think that's what reaches so many people. And the stories are kind of universal. Like I said, it's all about sharing the human condition. And when that speaks to someone, it's great. And it doesn't matter how old they are. I'm hearing from so many people who are sitting down to watch this, who are my age or a little older, maybe a little younger, but then all of a sudden their kids come in and are like, who are these guys? I know the names, but I don't know the names of the bands necessarily, but they know the individuals' names. And they're like, wow, this is really great. They heard the music, but didn't really know the story.
Yeah.
So there's something certainly magical about that time and place. All those artists were just drawn to this place that had a mystique and shared with one another and learned from one another. Answer to your question, I know, but
no, No, I'm really interested in the idea behind it, because you can't really say that. Also, like you say, it was a community, or like you've shown, it was a whole community. I mean, I guess you found that with grunge in Seattle, but it's not. I don't know if it's as common now. So yeah. I
mean, those little pockets spring up in places. I mean, London, it's happened. New York, obviously, it happens, but it's so big, it's hard to. And that this happened in Los Angeles. I mean, it's funny because, as we were talking earlier, I did the Go-Go's film sort of simultaneously to this one. So I've basically been in the LA music scene from 65 to 85. And the whole punk scene popped up, just down the hill from where Laurel Canyon was. So it's interesting, these pockets emerge. Just explosions of creativity.
California Dreamin' was written in New York in the early 60s, years before we actually recorded it.
I was begging John to go to California, and he said, we can't. That's not where the business is. The business is in New York. But one night, John woke me up in the middle of the night. Wake up. I'm writing a song. Listen to this. I'd be safe and warm if I was in L.A. California dreaming on such a winter's day. I said, it's beautiful, John. He says, help me write it. I said, tomorrow. He said, no, help me write it now.
So as a Doors fan, it must have been exciting for you how did you find this footage? In the first part, there's one of Jim Morrison, who kind of seems secluded a lot, or, you never see a lot of him in these parties. All of a sudden you have something of Jim Morrison riding a bicycle around Laurel Canyon in that area. Like, where'd this come from? How'd you find something like that? And how excited were you to find it?
Just master researchers out looking for these things. That was from some home movie footage that, because Jim was as was Ray. They were in film school at UCLA, so they were shooting material. So that's where that came from, and we just kept finding these little gems along the way.
How did you find the photographers?
Well, Henry Diltz, I knew from the History of the Eagles. He was in that film, and he provided a lot of stills for us there. And when I was working with Henry on that film, I was at his place and looking at all of his photographs going, oh my God, this is amazing. I knew he had all of these, boxes labeled, Neil, Joni, Buffalo Springfield, whatever, all of them just in these little cases. And so I've always been mesmerized by his collection. And so with the minute this project looked like it was going to be a reality, I called Henry up right away and said, would you be interested? And I also called Gary Burden, his partner, who was alive still at the time when we first started this. Sadly, he passed since then. But Henry's like, yeah, I'm in all the way. And once we got him in, because he's so well respected by all the artists, because he was also a musician. He was a musician before he was a photographer. So he was on board right away. And because of him, we were able to get so many of the other artists to say, okay, if Henry's in, we're in. Yeah.
So it seemed like the photographers were used as a narrator. They were the only two, Henry and Narit Wild. She's amazing in this film.
She's wonderful. I did not know Narit prior to this project. We discovered her photographs and contacted her, and she was, like Henry, really excited to do this. And she has just thousands of pictures that are stunningly beautiful. So we decided early on that they were our documentarians. They were going to be our guides through this because they lived there, they worked there, they photographed all of these artists. And when we would go to them to film them on camera, they would actually have something physical to do. They'd be showing us their slides, or Narit would be playing with the enlarger, or going through photographs. And we wanted everyone else, all the other artists, to be voice only, so that it was immersive and experiential, so you don't keep popping out for talking heads. Because there were so many artists, I think it would have been harder had you just kept cutting to their face all the time. It would just take you out of the moment.
I thought it was such a really beautiful way of telling the story. And I didn't realize how just warm and immersive, like you said, it would feel. But I thought it was such a wonderful way to tell the story.
Yeah. And also, obviously, a number of the artists are sadly no longer with us. So there would have always been that discrepancy of who can be on camera, who can't. So early on, we just decided we would just level the playing field. And we were also we did a lot of interviews, but we also used a lot of archival interviews. So, it was a way to mix and match all that material.
I'd like to do a song or a piece of music that's just a pure expression of joy.
Love Street. That's one where I had the music and he just came up with those words.
She lives on Love Street.
His girlfriend Pam had just moved into that place up above the country store there.
She has a house.
She has a house and garden. I would like to see what happens.
To see what happens.
There's a store where the creatures meet. That is the Canyon Country Store, the heart of Laurel Canyon.
Did you have more footage of the Joni Mitchell? Because Joni Mitchell is the only artist you used on screen currently.
That's actually a pretty long time ago that was shot. That was shot probably close to 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I thought it was more current than it. Not current, obviously.
No.
Yeah, that was.
Oh, okay.
But one of those scenes was one of my favorite parts where they ask, "Who are you?" And she stops for like maybe 10 seconds and goes really deep into, well, who is Joni Mitchell? When actually they just want her name. But I guess that's some insight into Joni's thinking, right?
I think it says everything about her. It's like she immediately goes to the deepest place. That was one of the first things I remember. I was sitting with my editor going through that interview. And when that moment came up, I'm like, play that again. And we played it again. I said, that's how we're starting this whole series. And obviously, we found a place for it, but it's not 10 seconds. It goes on for 40 seconds. And we just let her just sit there going, I don't know.
So it only seemed like 10 seconds to you.
Well, I know. I got immersed in it too. It's just, it's crazy. I love it. Let's talk about the Laurel Canyon scene and these parties and just kind of this get together. I guess the hub seemed to be where Mama Cass Elliot lived. Yeah. So was this a weekly occurrence? Did you hear how often everyone got together?
I think it happened. I don't think it was ever planned. I think it happened quite frequently. I think that house was probably always people revolving in and out. I don't think the parties were ever planned there. I mean, I'm sure some were, but I think it was very spontaneous and people would just show up. I think that was the gathering place. But people went freely from house to house. The doors weren't locked. People would walk in and say, hey, look what I'm working on. It was a very, just special open time.
Is that what you gathered from Mama Cass? I guess that's how she got her name, that she really wanted to create this environment. Is that,
unfortunately, I never met her, of course, but from everything I've heard about her, she just was so warm and embracing and encouraging and very nurturing of everyone around her, and everyone was drawn to her.
And it seems like a lot of these musicians are at a point I think you got a lot of current interviews, but I think a lot of people, especially I'm guessing David Crosby, really wants to get this story straight or make him, I think he acknowledges that he was an asshole back in the day. And now I think he had his own documentary, Remember My Name.
Yes.
And I think he wants to get his story out there.
Yeah, someone asked me about why didn't I try to make David Crosby look more like an asshole? I'm like, well, I think that I don't remember whether it's Roger or Chris Hillman that says, the Byrds were more like not so much a band of brothers, but more like a pirate ship.
Yes,
that kind of sums it up. I think that I can't speak for their motivation about why they want to tell the stories now. I suppose, sure, they want to get this story straight. Jackson, when I interviewed Jackson, he was a little bit combative. He's like, there was, all this Laurel Canyon stuff, it's just a myth. It was just a place. Mm-hmm. And then, then at the end of the interview, he said, well, good luck. It's an important story to tell. I'm like, well, you just said it's all a myth. Anyway, I let him have that say in the film, so he was happy about that, I think.
Wonder if he was just being humble or he really knew how special it was.
I don't know. I don't think Jackson says anything he doesn't mean.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So we're going to stop it right here. We are talking with Alison Ellwood, the director of the documentary Laurel Canyon, which you can now see on the EPIX channel. Welcome back to What Difference Does It Make, the podcast. We are talking with Alison Ellwood. Let's get back into it. Did you get Neil Young?
No, Neil and Joni did. We certainly reached out to them multiple times, but they're notorious for not wanting to do these things. We also reached out to Carole King and James Taylor, which we would have loved to have included them. And, unfortunately, again, they just, don't readily do these things. So it's too bad they're not in this. But there were thankfully a lot of archival interviews with Joni and Neil, so we were able to tell their story without having to, even though we weren't able to interview them.
Yeah. Have you ever talked with Neil before?
No.
You've never had the chance. Okay. Because I was going to ask,
no.
Who's more ornery? I feel like Don Henley was probably the hardest to pin down. What were your impressions of him?
Well, I knew Don quite well, obviously, from the Eagles film. And he was one of the last interviews to come in. And he agreed really at the 11th hour. And I sort of assumed he wasn't going to do it. And he was lovely. He was very appreciative of the story being told. And he told some other great stories that we hadn't heard before. So he was great. He just, he was reluctant, I guess, for a while to do it. But he came in at the end and he said some lovely things. So he was great.
Oh, that's great.
He just seems like more of a serious guy. Ornery when poked, but I think he's just serious. And Neil Young, one of the things that you used some American Bandstand footage, which I thought was so great because I did not watch it back then, so I had never seen that, and it just surprised me to see them on. It was Buffalo Springfield, on American Bandstand.
Yeah, explaining the origins of how the band got started. Yeah. We stopped, and then we started.
That was great. That was really fun to see. Yeah. Surprising, though.
No, I've not had the opportunity to speak with him ever, which is too bad, but maybe one day.
Yeah. I was wondering, just back to the Eagles documentary, I think they were all filmed separately. None of them were together, right? Wasn't that? I was wondering if that was the purpose of to get everyone's story and see if it matched up or what their... I was fascinated. I love. It was one of my favorite music documentaries ever. Is that?
Yeah.
That one.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, we weren't trying to get them to corroborate or not tell different versions of stories or anything. We did do an interview with Don and Glenn together, but we ended up not using it in the end. But no, we just. It's a lot. It's hard to interview more than one person at a time, honestly. And we wanted to get their individual stories. In fact, on that film, when Joe Walsh, who I'd interviewed, when he came to the office, he saw the film, and after he saw the film, he's like, "Shit, I didn't know we could be that open and honest. I want to do this again."
Did you let him?
We interviewed him again.
How much better did he get?
It was just a little bit more detail in some of the gnarlier parts of the story. And he was just a little more forthcoming. And so we used both of the interviews and they were both great.
What is your secret do you just let people talk, or what, how do you get a good interview out of any person, as someone who's interviewing people?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you do your research. So you know what you're talking about is critical, as you know. But just have it be a conversation, and the more of a conversation it feels like, the more open people are willing to be. On that one, on Eagles, we interviewed people multiple times, Don and Glenn in particular. I just like it to be conversational and make people feel relaxed. And if they can feel relaxed, usually you can have a nice conversation. They'll say honest things, and they know that we're going, I always also say at the beginning, we're not sugarcoating anything, but, we're also not trying to be salacious here. So we just want to tell an honest story. And if you're honest, I'll be honest.
Every Laurel Canyon documentary I've seen, there's been a number of them. They all talk about Mickey Dolenz and his Super 8 film. Did you get access to that footage?
If it exists still, Mickey's holding onto it tightly. When I was at Narit's house, she has all these boxes of stuff, and I found it was actually 16 millimeter he was shooting. And I found this reel of 16 millimeter and a reel-to-reel thing. And I said, Narit, what is this? And she's like, I have no idea. So I'm like, oh my God, it's the Mickey Dolenz footage. So we went and took it to the lab, and it ended up being like filler or something. I don't know. It was nothing. No, I don't know the answer. If Mickey has it, he's holding tight to it.
That was also great footage of them, of all of them.
Yeah.
Really great footage and fun to see. And I guess I hadn't realized what an integral part of the scene they were.
I know. No, I didn't know that either. That was, and in fact, the first day of shooting on the project was with Henry, and Peter Tork died that day. That phone call that happened, really happened when we were filming. And we knew at that moment that that's somehow how we would integrate them into the story. But they really were extrememely connected. It's crazy.
Yeah, you just, because you don't think of them that way, but I see now. Yeah.
So,
and he was more of a heartthrob than I realized.
Yeah. Yeah, and then Stephen Stills and Peter Tork were roommates, and Stephen Stills almost was one of the monkeys. I didn't know that either.
I didn't either.
But worked out for the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of meant to be, if you believe in that.
Yep, exactly.
When they were auditioning for Players of the Monkeys, every musician went down there. And Stephen Stills almost was one of the monkeys. He went to audition, and they said, well, your tooth doesn't really work. He had a snaggle tooth. He said, well, let me send my roommate in to see you guys. And that was Peter Tork.
Why do you want to be a monkey? Well, it's my natural inheritance.
So what was your field trip like when you went to, you're doing your research and you probably came to Laurel Canyon and went to the Troubadour? Yeah,
I mean, we started, I guess, probably close to 3 years ago. I mean, I was familiar with the canyon because I lived in LA for a long time. So I, had been up there quite a bit, and I just always just found it so beautiful. I wanted to live there at one point, but it was just way too expensive.
Which is funny. Sorry, I had to interrupt. It's so funny you say it's expensive, because the point that was made in the film a couple of times by the musicians is how cheap it was to live there.
Right. Like any place gets discovered. Yeah. no longer cheap to be there. So, look, I had to reread a bunch of stuff that I had read years ago. Obviously talking to Henry and going through all of his photographs and meeting Narit and going through her stuff. When we spent a lot of time driving around the canyon, and Ryan, our producer, he was in the helicopter when we did all of our aerials. Those were not drone shots; they were helicopter shots. And so, we had learned a lot about the topography and geography up there. So we knew specifically what he was going to be trying to get, the little capillaries and all the little offshoots and everything. Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful, lovely place. And, it's very scary driving there. My director of photography, Sam Painter, liked to drive and scare me to death when we were shooting.
It's fun to do the field trip, like Dave said, but I couldn't imagine living up there, up some of those streets.
Yeah. So driving up there, there's some pretty scary roads.
Yeah.
Are they still there, some of these homes? I know, I think Morrison's home was burned down, or what remains of
Joni's house is definitely still there. And in fact, I think she still owns it, actually. I think she rents it out. I don't know if anybody, I'm sure some of the specific ones are still there. I can't think of any offhand. I think Jim's place is, I don't know if it burned down. I don't know. It was behind the corner store.
Yeah, it's there. I think they call it Love Street. It's like, there's a little plaque that says Love Street.
Love Street, yeah.
Another photographer is Graham Nash. Did you get any access to his photos, or? Yes,
and his photos, or some of the photos of Joni are Graham's, and they're just stunning. He's actually a really good photographer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we definitely used some of his photographs.
Did you know so you say you worked with Henry on the Eagles documentary? He was really good on screen.
Yeah, he's a character. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did you know that when you were using it? Did you know that?
Yeah, we filmed with him. We actually filmed in the same location. We slightly different shot, but you can see from that location, that is literally what it looks like. There's a path this narrow you can walk through, and it is piled high everywhere. Photographs, books. Yeah. It's a very challenging environment to shoot in. But no, I'd been there before, and I knew about all the slides in the drawers behind his desk, and his light box is there, and that's where he works. That's his spot.
Yeah.
But you don't know. So someone who isn't used to being in front of the camera, who isn't, I know he was a musician, but not necessarily being a photographer, being used to being in front of the camera.
Well, we interviewed him really on camera in the Eagles film, so I knew he was a good on-camera guy. I think there's been a film about him too. I think done a fair share of media, and he's just a very comfortable soul. He's comfortable in his own skin, and he's very genuine.
You can tell.
And, so I don't think he's intimidated by cameras or anything. And like I said, I think he's done his fair share of spending time in front of cameras.
I should recommend, Holly, you need to go to the Morrison Hotel Gallery. That's on the Sunset Strip. It's all of Henry's photos, and it's really great. There's one in New York too, as well. Have you ever been to the Troubadour?
Yep.
And what do you like about? What are your impressions there? Who have you seen perform there?
Well, actually, the only time I've been there was when we were filming on the Eagles film. So Joe Walsh was playing.
Oh, nice! That's a good one.
No, I mean it's a lovely venue. No, I mean I haven't really gone to many shows there actually. So, but I haven't lived there in a very long time. So,
where did you live when you were in LA?
In Venice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, where Jim and Ray lived.
Yep, exactly.
All right, let's talk Linda, because I love Linda. Since we've only seen part one, did you get her in a current interview?
Yes.
And okay, how's she doing? And what first of all, how is she?
I mean, we interviewed her over probably a year ago now, and she was doing well. Then she's just such a lovely person to be around. She's just such a great storyteller and so smart and so funny. Her health obviously is not great, but, she seems to be doing all right. Like I said, I haven't seen her in a while, but she was lovely to interview, and think she's a big part of part two. So
very good. Yeah. And actually it seems like Linda was supportive of the male musicians. Like
yes.
What is the story? How did she find Glenn and Don, or where? I can't remember can you explain the story of how they became into a band?
She just happened to be at the Troubadour one night, and Don Henley was playing in his band prior to the Eagles, and she heard him drumming, and he was playing Silver Threads and Golden Needles and playing it in exactly the way she likes it to be played. So she's like, oh my God, we've got to get him. And then Glenn, she knew from hanging out at the Troubadour, and she just loved him. So she just asked them to come separately, to come join her, play backup for her. And they did. And then on the road with her, they kind of decided that they wanted to be in a band together. And she was incredibly supportive of that. And in fact, she and John Boylan recommended Randy Meisner and Bernie Ledden to them. And that's how the Eagles formed.
Mm-hmm. All right. I've also heard that it's not the Eagles. It's just Eagles. Can you?
Eagles. Yeah.
It is just Eagles.
It is Eagles. But, everyone, I mean, it's history of the Eagles, and they wanted that title. So it's like, it's inconsistent.
Oh, that's interesting. History of the Eagles. Yeah. Because Dave and I have been, arguing about this for a while.
No, they would say it's Eagles, not the Eagles. Mm-hmm. That's what they would say. But, should have been Eagles then.
Exactly. You can't go back now.
Nope.
At the end of part one, we know what's coming up is the Manson murders and all that's going on. How do you think that affected the music of Laurel Canyon?
Well, I think, there was always a darkness, even in the first part where the story seems a little bit lighter. There's still a darkness undertones there. The civil rights movement is happening, and violent things are going on. The Vietnam is raging, and these guys are draft eligible, and so there's always this underpinning darkness there. But I think in part two, what happens is that the darkness becomes immediately connected to the music scene directly, with Altamont, with the deaths at Altamont, and the Hells Angels being there. And then the Manson murders, and Manson was tied into the music industry and was a wannabe rock and roll star who got these, crazy people to follow him. So I think that the darkness was directly from the music, connected to the music world. I think changed things a bit. It also was these artists growing up and maturing and becoming aware and conscious of the world around them in a much bigger way. It's funny when you think about, for what it's worth, everyone thinks it's about the Vietnam War. It was written about these kids who couldn't get into this club, so they protested. Mm-hmm. The meaning it's been attributed to after other than what it was originally about. It's really cool. So I think the music, shifted a bit, but there's a lot of lightness in part 2 also. It's not all doom and gloom by any stretch of the imagination. It's just, reality strikes. These artists are getting older. Plus, frankly, the drugs changed. It went from pot
to say.
coke, which had a profound impact on everyone. And it was a bad impact. It was, that's a dark drug.
Did you talk to David Crosby a lot about that?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I talked to everybody about it. One of my first questions to everyone was, what did Laurel Canyon smell like? And they all said pot. And then, another question was, what happened when it changed, when the drugs shifted from pot to coke in the 70s? And they all were like, yeah, it just sucked the life out of something that was so beautiful before.
Did you talk to David Geffen? I don't remember.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I guess that was another part of like all of a sudden these managers like Elliot Roberts.
Yeah.
I'm glad you got him too. That's wonderful that he's in there.
Yeah, we did the last interview with him before he died.
Oh,
yeah, so sad.
Yeah, but yeah, it's wonderful that you were able to get that.
Yeah.
But yeah, suddenly I think a lot of these businessmen started to realize, hey, we can make a lot of money off this, and I think that changed the scene as well. Was that something that you gathered as well?
Yeah, no, definitely. And and Elliot and, David, at least certainly in the beginning, but, especially Elliot was a really good guy and and David was too, and had the best interests of their artists was foremost, but they also certainly realized they could make money, and others came in after them and really realized they could make money. And that's also when it shifted. And these bands, these artists went from playing at the Troubadour for one another and supporting one another to playing, stadiums and coliseums and, making huge amounts of money. And the scene just sort of kind of slowly faded out.
But there's still, did you find there's still a scene in Laurel Canyon? There's a lot of contemporary artists that still play there. You drive through Laurel Canyon. I still, once in a while, I'll see someone at the country store playing guitar just on the corner there.
Yeah.
And it's still a very healthy scene.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what's been interesting in COVID is the Laurel Canyon Society, they've been doing where everyone plays music out their doors and windows. So the music's now wafting out across the canyon again, which is really cool.
Oh, that's cool. We didn't even talk about Love a little bit, the band.
Yeah.
What an amazing band. But they kind of handed the baton off to the Doors. In a way, because they were not happy. Or why don't you tell this story of Love or what you?
Well, I did not know this story. There are people that have heard this story before, but I didn't know it before, and it's just amazing. It's that Love had signed with Elektra. They were their only rock band at that point, and they weren't happy with Elektra. Elektra wasn't in their minds promoting them enough. They got another offer. There was a really good offer, but Elektra wouldn't let them out of their contract. So Johnny and Arthur decided, well, okay, let's get them to sign the Doors, and then they'll let us out of our contract, and we'll go on and sign this contract with this much better company for us. And so, of course, they beg Holtzman to go see Jim and the Doors play. And in the film, he only goes twice. In reality, he went 3 times. Oh. Both times. For the first 2 times, he just like, I don't get it. Jim was staggering all over the stage, and he just didn't. But the 3rd time, he was on fire, and he's like, oh, my God. They signed them that night. And then all the money that Elektra would have presumably spent on promoting Love got switched to the Doors, and Love kind of got left in the dust. It's a sad story, but it's an amazing one.
They didn't have anything in writing that said that they could be that they can terminate their contract if the Doors were signed to the label.
No, they pushed the Doors on them, and then they got taken over. Love still continued to make amazing music, but I don't think that they were or are as known as they certainly should be.
Yeah, I agree. And I didn't even think about it at the time, but you mentioned in the film that when they toured the South, they were not allowed to play. That's insane.
Yeah. They were allowed to play if they agreed to play to segregated audiences, which they refused to do.
Yeah.
That is hard for us to imagine.
Yeah. Well, is it? It's
I know.
No. No.
It's so scary. It's like you think we should be so much further along, and look at where we are.
Yeah, I guess knowing that is apropos of now, right? Knowing the story of love, which I didn't know either.
Yeah. Johnny was lovely to talk to.
Oh, that's great.
Did you have such a twinkle in his eye too?
Did you have a lot of Arthur Lee footage, or what? That you were able to...
Not a lot, but there's some of that footage of love. That home movie stuff is so wonderful. Of them, running around and bicycling around, and then their cars driving. There's some really fun footage. There wasn't a lot of them though.
Yeah,
there wasn't a lot. Mostly, we tell their stories with stills.
That's amazing. Do you think that was? I mean, I guess the photographers mentioned that they didn't know that they were filming history, or
right.
But there are a lot of cameras around. There's more footage than you expect. Is that?
Yeah.
I mean, it seemed like a lot of people had cameras, but it wasn't like phones. But there were still people were documenting this like it was.
Yeah,
history.
no, they were. And what was great is that they were documenting on things like 16 millimeter that had longevity. Whereas, like when we get into the Go-Go's film, it's now early video, 80s video, which with the crappy home cameras that stuff is shot in, and it looks like crap and it doesn't hold up at all. So, we were lucky that we had so much, so many wonderful 16 millimeter films that people just shot home movies of stuff back then.
So Nurit was not, when you introduced her, she was not a photographer. She was not introduced as a photographer. She documented them, and she said, I think it was her own voice. She said, I carried a camera everywhere.
Yeah, no, she carried a camera. She came to LA as a groupie. She loved the music. She admitted she was a groupie. She got jobs working the lights at the Troubadour and the Whiskey. And then as a result of that, got to know the bands and just was she's led an interesting life. She spent a lot of time living in Israel in a kibbutz. And so she's, had some interesting experiences, and she just had her camera always with her. So she started taking pictures everywhere. And then she became a bona fide photographer. So
yeah.
Amazing. Also on the marquee, you mentioned there's the band, the Flying Burrito Brothers. Okay. So Graham Parsons, how much footage did you have of them? Cause, Graham was larger than life, or he seemed larger than life,
Yeah, no,
and very influential in the country rock scene and to the Byrds. So, I mean, what can you tell us about Graham and the Flying Burrito?
Yeah,
Brothers?
I mean, we didn't have too much of him specifically for this. I don't know that a lot of footage exists, but it wasn't all so Graham specific. I mean, some of my favorite footage in this Laurel Canyon project is the footage of him when Graham decides to go get those rhinestone suits done.
The nudie suits.
Yeah, they're so amazing looking, and they look amazing. Those photographs and we have some footage of that, which was cool. I don't know how much stuff exists of Graham. There's a lot of photographs of Graham, and we used a different music clip of Graham and the Burrito Brothers in the Eagles film. But yeah, I don't know how much more exists. We didn't have a ton of stuff of him. Mostly what we had of him is photographs.
Yeah.
Well, apparently Graham hung out with Keith Richards a lot.
Oh, notoriously, yes.
Yeah.
They were. I think they were best friends. Which I hope there's footage of them hanging out together somewhere.
Again, they're photographs. I don't know about footage.
Yeah,
it must be somewhere.
The last person that we mentioned that was kind of fun to see is Alice Cooper. He's all over the Laurel Canyon scene.
Yeah. That was great stuff.
And I didn't think, because I think of him as a metal guy, but Zappa took him under his wing.
I didn't even know Alice Cooper was part of the Laurel Canyon scene. I didn't know he lived there. I didn't know he was connected with Zappa in that way. And when I interviewed him, he told me that story about showing up at Zappa's house at 7 a.m. for an audition. Like, who would have thought that, especially back then, to show up at 7 a.m.?
A musician.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how ambitious he was.
What are you doing?
Yeah, that's how serious you are about making wanting to make a go of it.
Yeah, and Alice said they were so nervous and they came in their chrome pants.
That's great.
Anyway, it was great.
It seemed like Frank Zappa was kind of like Mama Cass. He was kind of a nurturing musician as well. Brought people into his fold, and if he liked it or even if he didn't get it, he wanted to be a part of their scene or tried to understand.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Mark Volman of the Turtles went on to play with Zappa. after the Turtles disbanded. So there's a lot of people floating in and out of each other's realms of lives, musically and otherwise, in that whole era.
It's very incestuous. There was a lot of like an exposition scene where there was a car, like a convertible driving in Laurel Canyon.
Yeah.
What was that? Did you recreate that, or was that something that you found?
We did 2 recreations we did both helicopter and on the ground with those cars. We had the green car in part 1 and the red convertible in part 2. We just wanted to, because, car driving in those canyons was such a part of their lives, and songs on the radio, that it was just a device to, be literally driving around in the canyons. So we shot that stuff. We also shot a lot of material on Super 8, and some of it you probably can't even tell whether it was, old archival footage or recently shot, because we intentionally shot it on Super 8 and kind of shaky and made it look like it was organic from the time.
It was very effective because it took me there too. That was great. Did they touch on the radio at all? I mean, we kind of, both of Holly and I have a radio background. I don't know if they mentioned like being heard on KHJ or KFWB, Boss Radio, or the importance of radio. What? Well, Jim Ladd plays a role in part 2. He actually starts off part 2. Yeah. So the radio comes in a bigger way in part 2, I think. But also what was happening, like everything, not just the music on the radio, but the world is sort of seeping in through radio and television. It started, it's landing in the living rooms in these places. We watched Kent State happen from a house in Laurel Canyon that we recreated. Going into recreating something, what did you do to recreate that atmosphere? Well, we built this set actually at our director of photography, Sam Painter's house, out on his balcony. And it was pretty elaborate, but we got a chair and an old television set, and we did it as a time lapse thing. So the city behind was getting darker and darker and darker as the night goes on. Yeah. We just, props and, set design and all that. And it was, that shot took a very long time to get. It was like, I think we filmed for about, 5 hours for that one shot. Did you grow up using Super 8? Your first, I'm sure you made some student films. Was it Super 8? What was your choice? I did shoot some Super 8 stuff. I was more of a photographer when I was a kid, I did shoot some Super 8, but when I was a kid, that stuff was expensive to get it, processed, and then we show it too and everything. So I started as a photographer. I was actually photographing from the time I was like 9 years old. And when I was 12, I was actually getting paid to do portraits. So that was my entry. I always wanted to be a photojournalist from reading National Geographic from a very young age, and turned into a documentary filmmaker instead. Yeah.
Logical transition.
Yeah, absolutely.
We love the scene. We love the Laurel Canyon scene, and someone who could really bring it together. There's been a lot of movies or documentaries trying to kind of encapsulate what exactly happened, and you seem to have accomplished that. It's a wonderful viewing, and it's available on EPIX right now.
Yep.
And it'll be on there for a while, I assume, and then probably I don't know. Do things come out? Do you get ephemeral? You get can you get like Blu-ray DVDs and?
Yeah, no. It's funny, that question's coming up a lot about this. I don't think that they've thought it through yet. There's a rights issue, which may be, because the music rights haven't. I don't think they paid for DVD release, so they might have to revisit all that in order to release it that way. But there's no answer for it right now. But it's going to live on EPIX for quite a while, I imagine. So. People can catch it. And if they don't have EPIX and want to check it out, they can do a 7-day free trial that's being offered.
Oh, excellent. Oh, that's
perfect. Thank you again, Alison. This was a joy, and we look forward
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Be safe out there, you guys.
Yes, you too.
Thank you. You too.
Take care. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow. Well, that was great fun. Thank you so much to Alison Ellwood, the director of the documentary Laurel Canyon, which is available on the EPIX channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you check us out on all our social medias. And then, of course, there's our website at wddimpodcast.com. Sign up, won't you, for our newsletter? It's a monthly newsletter, and we promise we won't spam you except this one time a month. The first of every month, you will get a newsletter telling you about what's upcoming, and sometimes a few little treats, a little audio treats, and a lot of fun. So check us out on WDDIMpodcast.com. And until next week, this is Dave.
This is Holly.
Check you later.
Over and out.